I thought the hardest part of burying my father would be the silence. But I was wrong. The real blow came at the reception when my brother stood up and announced he was selling our family home to settle his debts. Watching him wave a stack of papers that looked far too official, I realized my grief would have to wait. My father was barely in the ground, and the war for his legacy had already begun. The phone rang at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. It was a sharp, intrusive sound that cut through the low hum of my open-plan office in Chicago. I was staring at a spreadsheet, trying to reconcile a logistics budget for the next quarter, when the screen lit up with the area code I had spent 10 years trying to outrun. 717. I let it ring twice. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. There were only 2 reasons someone called from that number in the middle of a workday. One was an emergency involving money. The other was death. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Ruby, it is Mom." Her voice sounded thin, like paper tearing. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles turning white. "Mom? What is it?" "It is your father," she said, and then there was a silence so profound I could hear the static on the line. "He is gone. Ruby, it happened this morning, in the garage." The world did not stop spinning, but it seemed to tilt violently to the left. I looked around the office. My coworker, Sarah, was laughing at something on her computer screen. A printer was churning out pages in the corner. The ordinary mechanics of life continued, utterly indifferent to the fact that Daniel Butler, the man who had taught me how to drive a stick shift and how to balance a checkbook, was dead. "I will be there," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of the woman I had built myself into. Practical, resilient, the one who handled things. "I will leave tonight." I hung up and stared at the gray carpet. I did not cry, not then. Instead, I made a list. Cancel meetings, pack a bag, call the landlord, gas up the car. I moved through the rest of the afternoon like a machine, disassembling my life in Chicago so I could return to the place that had nearly broken me. Marrow Glen, Pennsylvania. The drive took 7 hours. I drove through the flatlands of Ohio and into the rolling, dark hills of Pennsylvania as the sun went down. By the time I crossed the state line, it was pitch black. The roads narrowed, winding through dense patches of forest that pressed against the asphalt. I had not been back in 3 years. I kept a polite distance, a boundary carefully maintained with holiday cards and brief, superficial phone calls. My family was a chaotic orbit of bad decisions and emotional volatility, and I was the satellite that had managed to break gravity. But death has a way of snapping the tether tight again. I pulled into the driveway of the house on Hawthorne Ridge Road just after midnight. The house was dark, a sprawling Victorian thing that had always felt too big for the 4 of us. Even before I left, it needed paint. I could see that even in the moonlight. The porch railing sagged on the left side. I sat in the car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. I was 32 years old. I had a 401k and a clean credit score. I was not the scared teenager who had fled this place, but as I stepped out into the cool night air, smelling the damp earth and the pine needles, I felt the old weight settle on my shoulders. I was home. The next 3 days were a blur of casseroles, condolences, and the suffocating scent of lilies. The viewing was held at Renan Hollow Funeral Home, a place with heavy velvet drapes and carpet that muffled every footstep. The room was full. My father had been a fixture in Marrow Glen, a contractor who built half the decks in the county, a man who paid for rounds of drinks even when he could not afford it. I stood near the casket, shaking hands. My face hurt from holding a somber, grateful expression. "Thank you for coming. Yes, it was sudden. He would have loved that you were here." Next to me, my mother, Elaine, sat in a high-backed chair. She looked small. That was the only word for it. She was a woman who used to have a nervous, fluttering energy, always moving, always tidying. Now, she was still. Her eyes were dry and glazed, staring at a spot on the floor near the entrance. She looked less like a grieving widow and more like someone who had been unplugged. "Elaine?" I whispered during a lull in the line. Do you need water? She looked up at me, blinking slowly. I do not know, she said. Do I? I signaled one of the funeral directors to bring a glass. Then there was Caleb. My brother stood on the other side of the room, near the entrance, greeting people with a vigor that made my stomach turn. Caleb was 2 years older than me, but he had always been the one who needed looking after. He was charming, handsome in a jagged sort of way, and perpetually on the verge of a big break that never came. Today, he looked different. He was wearing a suit that fit him perfectly, navy blue, expensive cut. Caleb did not own suits like that. He owned flannel shirts and work boots. His hair was trimmed. He stood with his shoulders back, shaking hands firmly, looking people in the eye with a gravity that felt rehearsed. He did not look like a man whose father had just died. He looked like a man running for office. I watched him clasp the shoulder of Mr. Henderson, the town pharmacist. Caleb leaned in, saying something low and serious, nodding deeply. Mr. Henderson looked surprised, then patted Caleb's arm. I walked over to him. Caleb, I said. He turned, flashing a sad, tight smile. Ruby, you holding up okay? I am fine, I said, keeping my voice low. You seem managing. I have to be, he said. Someone has to steer the ship. Ruby, Mom is in no state to handle the logistics. Logistics? I asked. It is a funeral. Caleb, not a merger. He adjusted his cuffs. There are things to take care of, he said. Dad left a lot of loose ends. I'm just trying to tie them up so you do not have to worry. You are only here for a few days, right? I know you have your big career back in the city. The way he said it, big career, carried a microscopic barb of resentment. I am here as long as I need to be. I said. Good, he said, looking past me to greet the next guest. Good. We will talk later. He moved away, sliding into the crowd with an ease that unsettled me. Caleb was usually anxious in these settings, sweating and cracking inappropriate jokes to break the tension. This calm, authoritative version of him was a stranger. The reception was held at the Cedar Room Bistro, a dimly lit restaurant on Main Street with dark wood paneling and overpriced wine. The mood was subdued, the clinking of silverware against china the only real noise. I sat with Mom, trying to get her to eat a piece of bread. She picked at it, tearing it into tiny white shreds on her plate. I miss his coffee, she whispered. I put my hand over hers. I know. Mom, he always made it too strong, she said, but I drank it anyway. A spoon clinked against a glass, a sharp, ringing sound that cut through the murmurs. I looked up. Caleb was standing at the head of the room, near the fireplace. He held a champagne flute in one hand. The room went quiet. Thank you all for coming, Caleb said. His voice was deep, projecting to the back of the room. It means the world to Elaine and me, and to Ruby. Of course. He nodded in my direction. I stiffened. Dad loved this town. Caleb continued. He loved the people in it. He built his life here, one brick at a time, but we all know that the last few years were hard on him. His health, the business, he worried a lot. I narrowed my eyes. Where was he going with this? He worried about leaving a burden. Caleb said, he worried about Mom, and that is why. In his final days, he made some hard decisions to ensure that she would be taken care of. The room was absolutely silent now. I wanted to honor his wishes immediately. Caleb said, I know this might seem fast, but Dad was a practical man. He did not want the house on Hawthorne Ridge to become a millstone around our necks. He wanted Mom to have freedom, not maintenance costs. My blood ran cold. So, Caleb said, taking a breath, it is with a heavy heart, but a clear conscience that I am announcing we will be placing the family home on the market immediately. We are selling it to settle urgent obligations and ensure Mom's future is secure. A ripple of shock went through the room. The house on Hawthorne Ridge was not just a house, it was where our family had lived for 40 years. It was paid off, or at least, I thought it was. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Caleb, I said. He looked at me, his expression beatific and sad. "I know. Ruby," he said, "it is hard, but it is what Dad would have wanted." He raised his glass. "To Daniel Butler. To Daniel." The room murmured, confused but obedient. I walked straight to him. I did not care who was watching. I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the hallway leading to the kitchen. "What are you doing?" I hissed when we were out of earshot. "Selling the house? Urgent obligations? What are you talking about?" Caleb pulled his arm away, smoothing his jacket. "Keep your voice down. Ruby, you are making a scene. You just announced you are selling Mom's house at the funeral reception." I said, "I think the scene has been made. Why would we sell? The mortgage was paid off 5 years ago. Things change." Caleb said, "Dad took out loans against the equity. A lot of them. The house is underwater. Rubes, if we do not sell now, the bank takes it. I am trying to salvage what equity is left for Mom." "Loans?" I asked. "For what?" "Business," he said vaguely. "Supplies. Payroll. Look, I have the paperwork. It is all legal." He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, that crisp, new suit, and pulled out a folded document. I took it. It was on thick, cream-colored paper. The letterhead at the top read, "Huxley and Crow Legal Group." I scanned the text. It was an expedited sale authorization, giving Caleb Butler power of attorney to liquidate real estate assets for the estate of Daniel Butler. It was signed at the bottom, a shaky scrawl that looked like my father's signature. I looked at the date next to the signature, January 14th, 2026. I frowned. "January 14th?" I asked. "Yes," Caleb said. 2 weeks ago." I looked at the signature block again. It read, "Daniel J. Butler. My father's middle name was Edward." "Caleb," I said, pointing at the paper. "Dad's middle name is Edward. Why does this say J?" Caleb glanced at it, unbothered. "Typo," he said. "The lawyers made a mistake drafting it. Dad signed it anyway because he was in a rush. He was sick. Ruby, he was not checking for typos. He just wanted it done." I looked at the date again, January 14th. I called Dad on the 14th. I said slowly, "He was at the hospital. He went in for that stress test on his heart. He was there all day." Caleb's eyes flickered. Just for a second, a tiny, micro-expression of panic that he covered with a heavy sigh. He signed it before he went in. "Ruby, or after? Look, do you want to argue about timestamps, or do you want to help me save Mom from bankruptcy? This does not feel right." I said, "It is legal," Caleb said, snatching the paper back. "Huxley and Crow are the best firm in town. Miles Huxley is handling it personally. If you have a problem, take it up with him. But right now, go sit down and stop making this harder than it already is." He turned and walked back into the dining room, adjusting his tie. I stood in the hallway, staring at the kitchen door. The smell of roasted chicken and stale wine made me feel nauseous. Something was wrong. The suit, the speech, the wrong middle initial, and the date. Dad had told me on the phone that day that he was exhausted, that he had slept through the afternoon in the observation ward. I needed to go home. I drove Mom home first. She went upstairs immediately, closing the bedroom door without a word. I stood in the hallway, listening to the house settle. The house on Hawthorne Ridge was a time capsule. The wallpaper in the foyer was the same floral pattern that had been there since 1995. The floorboards creaked in the exact same spots. I walked into the living room. It smelled of wood smoke and lemon polish, and underneath that, the faint, metallic scent of my father's aftershave. His recliner was in the corner, shaped to his body. The side table still held his coaster and a ceramic mug, chipped on the rim, that said "World's Okayest Golfer." I picked up the mug. It was heavy. I traced the chip with my thumb. This object was real. It was part of the history I understood. I set it down and walked toward his office. A small room off the kitchen. The door was open. The desk was a mess of papers, as usual. Invoices, receipts, old calendars. But as I stepped closer, something caught my eye. Mounted on the wall, right next to the desk, was a small gray box. It looked like a thermostat, but it had a digital keypad. I frowned. I had never seen it before. I touched it. It was cold metal, a lockbox. Why would Dad install a commercial-grade lockbox in his home office? He kept his valuables in a fireproof safe in the basement. And the key to that was hidden in a hollowed-out book on the shelf. I knew that. Caleb knew that. This was new. The keypad looked pristine. The buttons unworn. I tried a code. My birthday. Nothing. Mom's birthday. Nothing. I stepped back, staring at it. It felt like an intruder, a modern, sterile eye watching the chaotic warmth of the room. I went outside to get some air. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn. Ruby? I turned. Mara Tisdale was standing at the edge of the property line, holding a casserole dish covered in foil. Mara had lived next door for 20 years. She was a woman who knew everything that happened on Hawthorne Ridge, mostly because she spent her days gardening near the fence. Mrs. Tisdale. I said, "Thank you." She walked over, her face pinched with worry. "I am so sorry. Honey," she said, "I cannot believe it. He was just raking leaves last week." "I know," I said, taking the dish. "It was a heart attack." She nodded, looking toward the house. Then she lowered her voice. "How is Caleb handling it?" I hesitated. "He is keeping busy." Mara pursed her lips. I was not going to say anything. She said, "I did not want to upset your mother, but it has been bothering me." "What has?" I asked. "Last Tuesday," she said. "The week before he passed. It was late, maybe 11 o'clock. I was letting the dog out. I saw a car pull up, a black sedan. Nice car. Who was it?" I did not recognize him. She said, "A man in a suit. He went inside. He was in there for maybe an hour. When he left." She paused, looking down at her hands. "When he left, your father came out onto the porch. He looked shaken. Ruby. He was pacing back and forth. I waved to him, but he did not even see me. He just stood there, gripping the railing. I have never seen Daniel look like that. He looked scared." "Scared?" I repeated. Mara nodded. I thought maybe it was bad news from the doctor. But now, with everything, she trailed off. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She patted my arm. "You take care of yourself. Ruby, that brother of yours, well, you just take care." She walked back to her house, leaving me standing in the dying light with a cold casserole in my hands. A man in a suit, late at night, scared. I found Caleb in the kitchen when I went back inside. He was eating a sandwich, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. "Who was the man in the suit?" I asked. He did not look up. "What man?" "The man who visited Dad late at night last week. Mara Tisdale saw him." Caleb stopped chewing. He looked at me, his eyes flat. "Mara Tisdale needs to get a hobby," he said. "It was probably a doctor, or an inspector." "At 11 at night?" I asked. "And since when do inspectors make Dad look scared?" Caleb set the sandwich down. He wiped his mouth with a paper napkin. His movement slow and deliberate. "You are reading into things. Ruby, you are grieving, and you are looking for a villain because it is easier than accepting that Dad just died." "I am not looking for a villain," I said. "I am looking for the truth." "Why are you selling the house, Caleb?" "Really?" "I told you," he said. "Debts. Show me the debts." I said, "Show me the bank statements. Show me the liens, if it is that bad. I have savings. I can help. We do not have to sell the house." He laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Your savings?" "Ruby, you make a decent salary." "Sure, but we are talking about 6 figures here. Dad was in a hole, a deep one. You throwing $20,000 at it is like using a bucket to bail out the Titanic." He took a step toward me. The charm was gone now. His face was hard. "You do not understand how bad it is," he said softly. "And you do not want to know. I am handling it. I am the executor," I said, "or I should be. The will." "There is no will." Caleb interrupted. My stomach dropped. "What?" "Dad never updated it," he said. The old one from when we were kids? Lost. Burned in the fireplace for all I know. That puts us in intestate succession. I filed for emergency administration this morning. I am the personal representative. You did what? I asked, my voice rising. You filed this morning? Before the funeral? It had to be done. He said, the creditors are circling. Ruby, who are they? I demanded. Who are these creditors? He moved into my personal space. He smelled of mints and stale sweat. Stop asking questions, he hissed. You come back here after 3 years, acting like you own the place. You do not know what we have been dealing with. If you interfere, if you try to slow this sale down, the interest rates trigger and the penalties hit. Everyone will get hurt financially. Mom will be destitute. Is that what you want? I stared at him. I saw the fear behind his eyes. It was not concern for Mom. It was panic. Pure, distilled panic masked as aggression. I want to see the paperwork. Caleb, I said, all of it. You will see what I show you. He said, now, I am going to bed. I have a meeting with the realtor at 8. Do not be in the way. He brushed past me and went upstairs. I did not sleep. I sat in the living room as the grandfather clock ticked the seconds away. At 7 in the morning, I drove into town. I needed to find out who was listing the house. I went to Northline Realty. It was a small office near the town square. I walked in and asked for Jessa Pruitt. I knew Jessa from high school. We had played volleyball together. She was kind, a little gossipy, but honest. She came out of her office, holding a coffee cup. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Ruby? Oh my God. I heard about your dad. I am so sorry. Thanks. Jessa, I said. She looked nervous. She glanced at the receptionist, then back at me. What are you doing here? She asked. I heard you are handling the sale of the house. I said. She flinched. Well, yes, but Ruby, Caleb told me. What did he tell you? He told me not to talk to you, she said, lowering her voice. He said you were emotionally unstable and that you would try to sabotage the listing. He said he had power of attorney and that I was only to deal with him. My jaw tightened. Emotionally unstable. Did he sign the listing agreement? I asked. Yes, she said. Yesterday. Was it a standard listing? She bit her lip. No, she said. He asked for a quiet listing. No yard sign. No MLS blast. He wants to sell it to a private investment group. He said he already has a buyer lined up. He just needed me to process the paperwork. A private buyer, quiet listing, no competition. That meant a low price, a quick sale. Who is the buyer? Jessa? She hesitated. Ruby. I could lose my license. Please, this is my father's house. She sighed. Pinecrest Asset Services. She whispered. Never heard of them before, but they offered cash. Quick close. 10-day escrow. 10 days. They wanted the house gone in 10 days. Thank you. Jessa, I said, do not process that paperwork yet. Ruby, I have to. Just give me 24 hours. I said, please. She looked at me, seeing the desperation I was trying to hide. Okay, she said, 24 hours. But if Caleb calls, I will handle Caleb. I spent the day driving around, trying to make sense of the pieces. A wrong middle initial, a conflict with hospital dates, a mysterious lockbox, a man in a suit, a quiet listing. It was a puzzle where the edges were sharp enough to cut. I returned to the house after dark. Caleb's car was gone. Mom was in her room with the lights off. I went into Dad's office. I turned on the desk lamp. The yellow light pooled on the green blotter. I sat in his chair. It creaked, a familiar sound that made my chest ache. I started opening drawers. Top drawer, pens, staples, paper clips, middle drawer, stationery, bottom drawer, files. I went through the files, utilities, taxes, car insurance. Everything seemed normal. There were no letters from a Granite Vale Capital or any other creditor. If Dad was drowning in debt, he had hidden the paper trail well. I pulled the bottom drawer all the way out, checking to see if anything had slipped behind it. Nothing. I sat back, frustrated. I looked at the lockbox on the wall again. Then I looked at the desk itself. It was an old roll-top desk, my grandfather's. It had secret compartments. Dad used to show me when I was a kid. Magician's pockets, he called them. I felt under the lip of the central cubbyhole. My finger brushed against a small latch. I pressed it. A thin, false bottom in the center drawer popped up. My heart hammered. I reached in and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was not a document. It was a note. It was written on the back of a receipt from the hardware store. The handwriting was unmistakable. My father's jagged, all-caps printing. It was addressed to me, R.B. I stared at the letters. He was the only one who called me that. I read the text. Don't let them rush you. Ask about the trust. I read it again and again. Ask about the trust. The word hung in the air. Trust. My father did not have a trust. He had a will from 1998 that left everything to Mom. People like Daniel Butler did not have trusts. Trusts were for rich people with summer homes, not contractors with bad knees and a second mortgage. But he had written it. Don't let them rush you. He knew. He knew something was coming. He knew they would try to move fast. I looked at the lockbox. I looked at the note. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. My brother wanted to sell the house in 10 days. He said it was what Dad wanted. He was lying. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, listening to the silence of the house. I was not leaving. I was not selling. I was going to war. The morning sun in Marrow Glen did not shine so much as it bruised the sky with a pale, diluted gray. I sat in my rental car outside Marrow Glen Community Bank, staring at the brick facade. It was a sturdy, unpretentious building on the corner of Main and Elm, the kind of place that still gave out lollipops to children and calendars at Christmas. My father had banked here for 40 years. He knew the tellers by name. He knew the branch manager's golf handicap. I touched the pocket of my coat. The note was there. The paper felt thin and fragile against my fingertips. Ask about the trust. I took a breath, holding the air in my lungs until it burned, then exhaled and opened the car door. The lobby smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was quiet, save for the rhythmic clacking of a keyboard. I walked to the front desk, bypassing the teller line, and asked to see Todd Mercer. Todd was a senior loan officer who had handled my father's business accounts for as long as I could remember. He came out of his office 2 minutes later. Todd was a man who seemed to have aged in 10-year leaps. His hair was thinner than I remembered, his suit a little looser. When he saw me, his expression shifted from professional courtesy to a guarded, sympathetic wariness. "Ruby," he said, extending a hand. "I was so sorry to hear about Daniel. He was a good man. Thank you." "Todd," I said, "I need to talk to you about his accounts." He hesitated, his eyes darting toward the teller line. "Come back," he said. His office was small, cluttered with framed photos of golden retrievers and plaques for community service. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk. He did not sit. He leaned against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. "I assume you are here about the estate," he said. "I am." I said, "Caleb says there is no will. He says he is handling everything as the administrator." But I found a note. "Todd, from Dad." Todd's face went carefully blank. A note? It told me to ask about the trust. I said. The silence that followed was heavy. The air conditioning vent hummed above us. Todd looked at his shoes, then at the door, then finally at me. "Ruby," he said softly, "you know I cannot discuss client details without the proper authorization. If Caleb is the administrator." "Todd," I cut in. "My father wrote this note before he died. He was scared. He told me not to let them rush me. Caleb is trying to sell the house in 10 days. He says Dad was drowning in debt." "Was he?" Todd rubbed the back of his neck. He looked pained. "Your father ran a construction business. Ruby, cash flow was always variable. You know that. Variable is not drowning." I said, "Variable is not a fire sale at a funeral. Is there a trust?" Todd walked around his desk and sat down. He typed something into his computer. The keystrokes were loud. He stared at the screen for a long time. I watched the reflection of the monitor in his glasses, but it was just a blue blur. He turned the monitor slightly away from me. "I cannot show you this," he said, "and if you quote me, I will deny I said it." I leaned forward. "There is a file," he said, choosing his words with agonizing precision. "It is flagged in our system. The header is estate/trust, but the access notes say, refer to counsel." "Refer to counsel?" I asked. "Which counsel? Huxley and Crow?" Todd shook his head. "No," he said, "not Huxley. The note says refer to counsel for instrument verification. It means the bank does not hold the primary document. We just hold the accounts linked to it, but the accounts are frozen pending executor clearance. So there is a trust account," I said. "There is an account with a trust designation," he corrected. "But Ruby, I cannot tell you who the trustee is or who the beneficiaries are, not until I get a court order or a certificate of trust." "But Caleb does not know about it," I said. "Or if he does, he is ignoring it." Todd looked at me, his gaze steady. "If there is a trust, Ruby, then the will, or lack of one, might not matter for those specific assets. Trusts operate outside of probate. That is the point of them. And if the house is in the trust," I asked, "then Caleb cannot sell it." Todd said, "Not unless he is the trustee." He closed the window on his screen. "That is all I can say. Ruby, please, do not make me lose my job." I stood up. My legs felt shaky. "Thank you, Todd." He walked me to the door. Before I left, he leaned in close. "Be careful, Ruby. Small towns talk, and right now, the talk is that your brother is in over his head with some people who do not use banks." I sat in my car for 10 minutes, processing, refer to counsel, people who do not use banks. I needed a lawyer, not one of my father's drinking buddies, not the firm Caleb was using. I needed someone outside the loop. I searched on my phone and found a firm called Lake and Briar Estate Counsel. They were located in a renovated townhouse on the edge of the historic district. The reviews were solid. Words like thorough and unintimidated came up. I called and begged the receptionist for an emergency slot. She heard the desperation in my voice and squeezed me in at 11 o'clock. Nina Caraway was not what I expected. She was younger than me, perhaps 30, with sharp, dark eyes and a chaotic desk stacked high with manila folders. She wore a cardigan over a band t-shirt, but her handshake was like iron. She listened without interrupting as I laid it all out. The funeral announcement, the Huxley and Crow document, the wrong middle initial, the lockbox, the note, Todd Mercer's cryptic warning. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and tapped a pen against her chin. "Let me see the document Caleb showed you," she said. I had taken a picture of it with my phone at the reception. I pulled it up and handed it to her. She zoomed in, scanning the text. Her eyebrows knit together. "This is garbage," she said flatly. "What?" "It is drafted to look like a specific power of attorney," she said. "But the language is incredibly broad. Expedited sale authorization is not a standard Pennsylvania legal term. It is legalese designed to look impressive to lay people. And this clause here, waiving the beneficiary's right to an accounting, that is highly irregular for a document signed on a deathbed." She handed the phone back to me. "If Huxley and Crow drafted this," she said, "they are walking a very fine ethical line. Miles Huxley is usually smarter than this, unless he is banking on no one checking. He thinks I am just the daughter from Chicago who wants to get back to her job." I said, "He thinks I will sign whatever to get my inheritance check." Nina nodded. "Standard predatory playbook," she said. "Isolate the heir, manufacture urgency, claim insolvency." She pulled a fresh legal pad toward her. "Okay, Ruby. Here is Probate 101. When a person dies without a will, they are intestate. The state has a default list of who gets what. Usually, it is the spouse, then children. Your mother is alive, so she is the primary heir. If the house is in your father's name alone, it goes to her. If it is joint, it is hers automatically. It is in Dad's name," I said. "He bought it before they were married. He never changed the deed. He was old-fashioned like that. Okay, Nina said. So your mother has priority to be the administrator. If she declines, it goes to the children. You and Caleb have equal priority. Caleb said he already filed. I said, he said he is the interim personal representative. Nina frowned. Interim administration is rare. She said, you only get that if there is a massive emergency, like a perishable crop rotting in a field, or a business deal that will collapse in 24 hours. Selling a family home to pay vague debts does not usually qualify. She stood up and grabbed her coat. We need to go to the courthouse. She said, we need to see exactly what your brother filed. If he lied to the Register of Wills to get those letters of administration, we can revoke them, but we have to move fast. If he closes on that house, unwinding the sale is a nightmare. The Bryer County Courthouse was a limestone fortress in the center of town. The Register of Wills' office was in the basement, a room that smelled of dust and decaying paper. Nina knew the clerk, a woman named Barb who wore reading glasses on a chain. Barb, we need to pull the file for Daniel Butler. Nina said, filed yesterday or this morning? Barb tapped at her computer. Butler, Daniel Edward. She read, filed yesterday morning at 9 a.m. I looked at Nina. 9 a.m. My father had died at 6 a.m. Caleb had been at the courthouse 3 hours later. Barb retrieved the file. It was thin. Nina opened it on the counter, and we both leaned over. There was the petition. Caleb Butler, petitioner, waiver of bond, renunciation of right to administer signed by Elaine Butler. Mom signed it. I whispered. Nina pointed to a paragraph in the center of the petition. Reason for emergency grant. Immediate insolvency of estate due to secured obligations held by Granite Vale Capital. Creditor intends to foreclose within 48 hours absent liquidation of assets. Granite Vale Capital. I read aloud. Have you ever heard of them? Nina asked. No, I said. Nina pulled out her phone and did a quick search. Nothing, she muttered. No website, no LinkedIn, just a corporate registration in Delaware. That is a shell company. Ruby? Or a hard money lender. She looked at the signature on the creditor notice attached to the petition. Drew Malvern. Authorized agent. This is bad, Nina said. Caleb told the court that the house is about to be seized. That is how he got the emergency powers. He painted a picture of a financial apocalypse. But is it true? I asked. We do not know. Nina said, but look at the date on the foreclosure notice. I looked. It was dated January 10th, 4 days before Caleb claimed Dad signed the sale authorization. They were pressuring him before he died. I said, Nina closed the file. We need to stop this. She said, I can file a caveat. But since the letters are already granted, we have to file an emergency petition to suspend his authority. We need to argue that the sale is not in the best interest of the estate and that there are questions regarding the validity of the debts. Do it, I said. It will cost money. Ruby, she said gently, and it will be public. The petition will be a matter of record. People will know you are suing your brother to stop him from settling your father's debts. In a town like this, you will look like the villain. I thought about the note in my pocket. Don't let them rush you. I do not care what I look like. I said. I drove back to Hawthorne Ridge with a knot in my stomach that felt like a fist. Caleb's car was in the driveway. So was a truck I did not recognize. A shiny black pickup with no company logo. I walked into the house. The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Caleb was in the living room. He was sitting on the sofa, his elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Standing by the fireplace was a man. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket and expensive jeans. He was not from Marrow Glen. He had the sharp, manicured look of city money. When I walked in, the man stopped talking. He looked at me with a polite, empty smile. Ruby, Caleb said, sitting up. His face was pale. Who is this? I asked. This is Mr. Malvern, Caleb said. From Granite Vale. The creditor. I looked at Drew Malvern. He did not look like a banker. He looked like a shark in human skin. Ms. Butler, Malvern said. His voice was smooth, like oil. My condolences. I was just explaining to your brother that our patience has limits. Get out of my house, I said. Malvern raised an eyebrow. It is not your house. Ms. Butler, it is an asset of the estate, and the estate owes my firm a significant amount of money. Show me the note, I said. Show me the original loan agreement signed by my father. Malvern chuckled softly. All in due time. Caleb has the copies. We are just here to facilitate the solution. The sale keeps things clean. No courts, no sheriffs, just a transaction. He turned to Caleb. Tomorrow. Caleb, noon, or the fees double again. Malvern walked past me. He did not touch me, but I felt a chill radiating off him. The front door clicked shut. I turned to Caleb. Who is he? I asked. And do not lie to me. Caleb looked at the floor. He looked like a child who had broken a window. He is a guy, Caleb said. How much? Caleb? He took a shaky breath. 80,000. My knees almost buckled. $80,000? Dad borrowed $80,000? For what? Caleb did not answer. He began to pick at a loose thread on the sofa cushion. Caleb, I said, my voice rising, did Dad borrow that money? No, Caleb whispered. The silence that followed was absolute. I stared at him, the pieces slammed together, the confidence at the funeral, the rush, the fear. You, I said, it is your debt. Caleb looked up, his eyes wet and red-rimmed. It just got out of hand. Ruby, sports betting, online poker. I was up. You know? I was up 20 grand last year. I thought I could turn it into a down payment on a house for me and Sarah. But then, I lost, and I chased it. He stood up and began to pace, his hands shaking. I borrowed from a guy in Philly, a private lender, but he sold the debt to Granite Vale. And these guys, they are not normal lenders. Ruby, they add fees every week, late fees, processing fees. It went from 30 to 80 in 6 months. And you made Dad sign for it? I asked, horrified. I tried to get him to co-sign. Caleb said, he refused. He told me to figure it out myself. He said he was done bailing me out. So you forged his signature? No, Caleb shouted. No, I did not forge it. I tricked him. I stared at him. What? I told him it was for the business, Caleb said, his voice cracking. I told him I needed a bridge loan for materials on the McAllister job. I slipped the guarantee in with a stack of invoices. He signed it without looking. He trusted me. I felt sick, physically sick. So Dad died thinking he was signing for lumber. I said, but he was signing away his home to pay for your gambling. He found out. Caleb said, he found out a week before he died. That is why he was so upset. That is why the guy in the suit came to the house. It was Malvern. He came to collect. Dad told him to get off the property. He was going to go to the police. Ruby, he was going to turn me in. He sank back onto the sofa. But then he died. Caleb whispered, and now I can fix it. If I sell the house, I pay off Malvern, I pay off the mortgage. Mom gets the rest. It is a fresh start. No one has to know. You want to sell Mom's home to cover your crime. I said, it is the only way, Caleb cried. If I do not pay them, they will sue the estate anyway. They have the paper. Ruby, it is a valid lien. If we go to court, the truth comes out. Mom finds out I stole from them. The whole town finds out. Is that what you want? Do you want Dad's legacy to be that his son was a thief? He looked at me, pleading. Let me sell it. Please. I will make it right. I will take care of Mom. Just let me sell it. I looked at my brother. I saw the terror in him. I saw the weakness. And for a second, I felt the old reflex, the urge to fix it, to clean up the mess, to hide the shame. It would be so easy to say yes, to let the house go, to let Caleb bury his mistake. But then I thought about the lockbox. I thought about the note. Don't let them rush you. Dad knew. He knew Caleb had betrayed him, and he had tried to protect the house. I cannot do that. Caleb, I said. He stood up, his face twisting into anger. You are so selfish. He spat. You leave for 3 years. You ignore us. And now you come back and want to play moral arbiter? You are going to destroy this family. Ruby, the family is already destroyed, I said quietly. You destroyed it. I turned and walked out of the room. I needed to clear my head. I drove to the one place in Marrow Glen that felt neutral, the Stone Creek Chapel. It was a small, non-denominational church on the edge of town. I found Pastor Len Alden in the garden, pruning rose bushes that were just dormant sticks in the winter cold. Len had baptized me. He had married my parents. Ruby, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. I saw you at the service, but I could not get close. Hi, Len, I said. He looked at me closely. You look like you are carrying the weight of the world, he said. Something like that. We sat on a cold stone bench. Len, I said, did Dad come to see you recently? Len nodded slowly. He did. About 2 weeks ago. What did he want? He asked for a witness favor. Len said, a witness favor? He wanted me to witness a signature. Len said, he said he was making some changes to his estate planning. He was very specific. He wanted someone outside the family, someone he could trust. Did you do it? I asked. No, Len said. We scheduled it for that Friday, but he called me Thursday night and canceled. Why? He said, it is handled. He sounded resigned. I asked if he wanted to reschedule, and he said, no, Len, it is done. The path is set. The path is set. Did he say anything else? I asked. He said to pray for Caleb. Len said softly. I closed my eyes. Ruby, Len said, your father was a man who believed in redemption, but he also believed in consequences. He was struggling with something heavy. If there is anything I can do, you can tell me if he mentioned a trust. I said. Len shook his head. He never used that word, but he did say he was protecting the core. That was his phrase. I have to protect the core. Len, everything else can burn. I left the church and drove to Ridgeview Medical Center. It was a long shot, but I needed to know what happened on the 14th. I went to the records department. The clerk was a young woman chewing gum. I need the medical records for Daniel Butler. I said, dates of service January 10th through his death. She typed in the name. Are you the personal representative? She asked. I am his daughter. She shook her head. HIPAA rules. She said, deceased patient records can only be released to the executor or administrator of the estate. The system shows a Caleb Butler is the contact. I just need to know the time of his admission on the 14th. I said, I cannot give you that. She said, I am sorry. I stood there, feeling the wall of bureaucracy. Caleb held all the cards. He had the legal authority. He had the records. He had the narrative. I walked back to the car. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at my hands. They were shaking. This was the moment, the pivot point. The old script was clear. Ruby saves the day. Ruby pays the bill. Ruby smooths the ruffled feathers. If I stopped the sale, Caleb would be exposed. He might go to jail for fraud. Mom would be devastated. The town would talk. The shame would be public and permanent. If I let the sale happen, Caleb walks away free. The debt vanishes. The house is gone. But the reputation is saved. It would be the kind thing to do. The sisterly thing. But it would be a lie. My father had built that house with his own hands. He had framed the walls. He had laid the floors. He had raised us there. And in his final days, he had been tricked by his own son into signing it away. He had fought back. He had installed a lockbox. He had written a note. He had tried to protect the core. If I let Caleb sell it, I was not saving the family. I was helping Caleb finish the con. I started the engine. I was done being the fixer. I was done being the peacekeeper. I pulled out of the parking lot and called Nina. File it, I said. File what? Nina asked. The emergency motion. Stop the sale. I want an injunction. Are you sure, Ruby? Nina asked. Once we file. There is no going back. Caleb will be served tonight. I am sure. I said, the motion was filed at 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the court closed. Nina called me to confirm. It is done, she said. The judge granted a temporary restraining order on the transfer of the property. A hearing is set for next Tuesday. Caleb cannot sell the house, and he cannot let anyone onto the property for inspections. Thank you. Nina, get ready. Ruby, she said. The storm is coming. I drove back to the house on Hawthorne Ridge. I parked on the street, not wanting to block the driveway. I walked up the path. The house looked tired in the twilight. The windows were dark. I unlocked the front door. Caleb was waiting for me. He was standing in the foyer. He held a piece of paper in his hand. The service copy of the motion. A process server must have just left. You bitch, he whispered. I walked past him. It is over. Caleb, the sale is stopped. He grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, painful. You have no idea what you have done, he said. They will hurt us. Ruby, they will come for us. Let them come, I said, yanking my arm free. But they are not getting this house. He looked at me with pure hatred. Dad would be ashamed of you, he said. I stopped. I turned to face him. Dad knew. Caleb, he knew what you did, and he was trying to stop you. I am just finishing what he started. Caleb flinched. For a moment. The mask slipped, and I saw the terrified boy underneath, but then it hardened again. You are on your own, he said. When Granite Vale comes collecting, do not come crying to me. He slammed the front door and stormed out to his car. He peeled out of the driveway. Tires screeching. I was alone. The house was silent. I locked the door. I checked the windows. I went into the kitchen and made tea. My hands were still trembling. I carried the tea into the living room. I sat in Dad's recliner. I felt a strange sense of calm. The explosion had happened. The bridge was burned. Now, there was only the debris to sift through. I looked at the bookshelf next to the fireplace. Dad's collection of history books, biographies of presidents, the Civil War. I remembered something. Dad used to hide cash in his books. $20 bills in the pages of Team of Rivals. I stood up and walked to the shelf. I ran my fingers along the spines. I pulled out a thick volume on the history of Pennsylvania railroads. It was heavy. I opened it. No cash. But tucked into the back flap was a folded piece of notebook paper. I unfolded it. It was a list. My father's handwriting, but shaky. Much shakier than the note in the desk. January 4th, meeting with Huxley. M. Miles. January 6th, C. Asking about deed again. January 8th, Granite Vale. Who are they? January 10th, threat from D. M. Malvern. January 12th, meeting. The last entry was circled. January 12th, meeting. There was no name next to it, just a question mark. I stared at the name Huxley. M. Miles Huxley, the attorney who drafted the sale authorization. Dad had met with him on January 4th, 10 days before he supposedly signed the authorization. If Dad met with Huxley, then Huxley knew Dad was lucid. He knew Dad was suspicious. So why did Huxley help Caleb draft a document to sell the house? And who was the meeting on January 12th with? I looked at the list. It was evidence. Evidence that my father was investigating his own son and the people circling him. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Next to the first note, the wind howled outside, rattling the old window panes. The house groaned. Settling into the night, I was not just fighting Caleb anymore. I was fighting a lawyer, a predatory lender, and a secret my father had died trying to solve. I turned off the lamp. I will protect the core, Dad. I whispered into the darkness. I promise. The injunction bought us time, but it did not buy us peace. In Marrow Glen, silence is rarely empty. It is usually full of things people are trying not to say. For 2 days after the court order stopped the sale, the phone in my father's house did not ring. The silence was heavy, accusing. Caleb moved through the rooms like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, eating cereal over the sink at 2 a.m. Mom stayed in her bedroom, claiming migraines, but I could hear the low murmur of the television through the wall, hour after hour. I spent the mornings on the phone with Nina Caraway and the afternoons sifting through the chaotic paper trail in Dad's office. I was looking for the trust instrument, the original will, Anything that could anchor us against the tide. Then, on a Thursday morning, the silence broke. My cell phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered it in the kitchen, watching a gray squirrel navigate the frozen oak branch outside the window. "This is Ruby," I said. "Ms. Butler," a voice said, smooth, cultured, with the faint, metallic echo of a headset. "This is Drew Malvern. We met briefly at the house." I tightened my grip on the phone. Drew Malvern, the man from Granite Vale Capital, the shark in the leather jacket. "I have nothing to say to you." "Mr. Malvern," I said, "my attorney is Nina Carraway. You can direct all communication to her office." I was about to hang up. "Please, Ms. Butler," he said. His voice did not rise. It had a terrifying, patient quality. "I am calling as a courtesy. Lawyers are expensive. Court filings are public. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I am not interested in your courtesy." I said, "I am offering a family-friendly settlement," he said. I paused. The phrase family-friendly sounded obscene coming from him. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we are willing to forgive the accrued interest and the penalty fees," he said, "if you can convince your brother to sign a consent sale by Monday. We will walk away with just the principal. Caleb keeps a little equity. Your mother gets to leave with her dignity. No one has to testify. No one has to know the messy details of your brother's recreation." He let the word recreation hang there. It was a threat wrapped in velvet. "And if I refuse?" I asked. "Then we proceed with the lien enforcement," he said. "And we will depose your brother. We will depose your mother. We will put every single gambling loss, every bounced check, and every desperate text message into the public record. Marrow Glen is a small town. Ms. Butler, shame has a long shelf life there." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was right. He knew exactly where the soft tissue was. "Send me the proof of the debt," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Send me the original loan agreement with my father's wet signature. Not a digital copy. The original." There was a pause. "We sent the validation to your counsel," he said. "You sent a spreadsheet." I said, "I want the contract." "Ms. Butler," he said, and his tone shifted, losing the polish, becoming something colder, sharper. "You are complicating a very simple transaction. Your father is gone. The money is spent. The house is the collateral. Do not burn your family down to prove a point." I hung up. I stood in the kitchen, breathing hard. I felt dirty, as if his voice had left a film on my skin. He was not just a lender. He was a predator who knew that in a town like this. Reputation was worth more than real estate. I drove straight to Nina's office. She was buried behind a stack of files, eating a bagel. When I told her about the call, she stopped chewing. "He called you directly?" she asked. "Yes, that is a violation," she said. "He knows you are represented. I will file a sanction motion. He does not care about sanctions." "Nina," I said, "he is trying to scare me. He offered a settlement. He said he would waive the fees if we sell by Monday." Nina wiped her hands on a napkin and pulled a file from the stack. "Of course he wants to settle," she said, "because if we get to discovery, his math falls apart. Look at this." She opened the file and spread out 3 different letters from Granite Vale Capital. "This one is dated January 10th, she said, pointing to the first document. "It claims the total payoff amount is $62,000. She pointed to the second letter. "This one is dated January 20th. The amount is $75,000. And this one," she said, tapping the third, "is the one they sent me yesterday. $89,000. I stared at the numbers. "How does it grow that fast?" I asked. "Stacked fees," Nina said grimly. "It is how these private lending outfits operate. They do not just charge interest. They charge a monitoring fee, a risk assessment fee, a document courier fee. If you miss a payment by 1 hour, the default interest rate kicks in, which can be 25% or higher. Then they charge interest on the fees. It is a snowball rolling down a mountain. Ruby, it is designed to be impossible to pay off. But is it legal?" Nina sighed. "It is in the gray zone," she said. "If your father signed a contract agreeing to these terms, It is technically a valid contract, but if the terms are unconscionable, meaning so unfair that no reasonable person would sign them, a judge can throw them out. That is why Malvern is pushing for a settlement. He does not want a judge looking at his fee structure. He wants the house sold and the cash in his pocket before anyone does the math. So we fight. I said, we fight. Nina agreed. But Ruby, you need to be prepared. If Caleb really did trick your father into signing this, and we prove it, Caleb could face criminal charges, forgery, fraud, elder abuse. I looked out the window at the brick buildings of Marrow Glen. I know, I said quietly. I needed to see the face of the other side, not Malvern, but the legitimate face, the one that made the fraud look like law. I made an appointment at Huxley & Crow Legal Group. Their office was on the town square, next to the courthouse. It was a beautiful building, restored red brick with black shutters and a brass plaque that gleamed in the winter sun. Inside, it smelled of leather, mahogany, and old money. I told the receptionist I had questions about my father's estate file. She looked nervous. She made a quick phone call, whispering behind her hand. "Mr. Huxley will see you," she said. As I walked toward the back offices, I saw a paralegal hurrying down the hallway in the opposite direction. She was carrying a thick red file folder. The label was handwritten in sharp black marker. Butler, Hawthorne. She saw me looking and immediately clutched the file to her chest, turning her body away as she slipped into a side room. I heard the distinct click of a lock turning. It was a small thing, a reflexive moment of secrecy, but it told me everything I needed to know. They were hiding something. Miles Huxley's office was vast. He sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from the deck of a galleon. He was a handsome man in his 60s, silver-haired, tan, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. "Ruby," he said, standing up and coming around the desk to offer me a warm, firm handshake. I was devastated to hear about Daniel. He was a pillar of this town, a true craftsman. He gestured for me to sit on a plush leather sofa. "Thank you, Mr. Huxley," I said. "I am here because I'm confused." "Confused?" he asked, sitting in the armchair opposite me. He crossed his legs, looking relaxed, paternal. "My brother produced a document from your firm," I said, "an expedited sale authorization. It has the wrong middle initial for my father. It has a date that conflicts with a hospital stay, and it authorizes a sale that contradicts everything my father told me in the weeks before he died." Miles Huxley sighed. He clasped his hands over his knee. "Ruby," he said softly, "grief is a terrible fog. It messes with our memories. It messes with our perception of time." Caleb came to me in a state of extreme distress. He explained the financial situation. We drafted the document to help the family navigate a crisis. It was a standard instrument for an emergency liquidation. "Standard?" I asked. "To sell a family home in 10 days to a shell company?" "We were not involved in the sale itself," Miles said smoothly. "Only the authorization. We simply provided the tool your father requested." "My father requested it?" I asked. "Or Caleb?" Miles smiled. A tight, indulgent smile. Daniel signed it. "Ruby, that is what matters legally. Did you meet with my father on January 4th? I asked. His eyes flickered. It was the same micro-reaction Caleb had given me. A beat of hesitation masked by a blink. "I meet with many clients. Ruby, I found a note." I said, "My father's handwriting. January 4th. Meeting with Huxley. M." Miles uncrossed his legs. The warmth evaporated from his face, replaced by a cool, professional distance. "If Daniel came to see me, our conversation is privileged. Even if he came to tell you he was being blackmailed?" I asked. "Even if he came to ask for help protecting the house from the very people you are now helping?" Miles stood up. "Ruby," he said, "you are distraught. You are looking for conspiracies where there is only mismanagement. Your father was a good man, but he was bad with money. He got into debt. He tried to fix it. It failed. Now you are trying to rewrite history because the truth is painful. I understand. But you are complicating grief with litigation. and that is a very expensive way to mourn." He walked to the door and held it open. "I would advise you to let Caleb handle the estate." He said, "He knows the reality of the situation." I stood up. I walked to the door, then stopped and looked him in the eye. I saw the file. Miles. The red one. Butler. Hawthorne. "I saw your staff hide it." Miles did not blink. "We keep excellent records." "Ruby, good day." I walked out of the office shaking. He was good. He was very good. He made me feel like a hysterical child. He made the gaslighting feel like wisdom. I needed an ally, someone who knew how to look beneath the polished surface of this town. I called Sienna Hart. Sienna and I had been inseparable in middle school, back when we both wore oversized flannels and listened to Nirvana. She had stayed in Marrow Glen, becoming a reporter for the Marrow Glen Ledger. We met at a diner on the outskirts of town, a place with chrome stools and greasy menus. Sienna looked tired but sharp. She had short, choppy hair and ink stains on her fingers. "Ruby," she said, hugging me hard, "I am so sorry about Daniel." "Thanks. See, we ordered coffee. Black. So," she said, leaning over the table, "the court docket says you are suing your brother." "That is a hell of a homecoming. It is not just Caleb." I said, "It is bigger." I told her everything. The debt, Granite Vale, Malvern, Huxley, the lockbox, the note. When I finished, Sienna let out a low whistle. "Granite Vale Capital," she murmured. "I have heard rumors. They have been buying up distressed properties in the county for the last year. Mostly foreclosures, but I never connected them to a specific face. They are predatory." I said, "And they are working with Huxley." Sienna nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Huxley is the golden boy," she said. "He is on the zoning board. He is on the hospital board. If he is funneling vulnerable estates to a shark like Malvern, that is a massive story." I hesitated. "I do not want a story." "Sienna, I just want to save the house. If this blows up, my mother—" "Ruby," she said gently, "it is already blowing up. The injunction is public record. People are talking. The only way you control the narrative is if you find the truth before they do." She pulled a notepad out of her purse. "Let me dig," she said, quietly. "I can pull the corporate filings for Granite Vale. I can look into Huxley's recent property transfers. I will not print a word without your okay." I looked at my friend. I saw the hunger in her eyes, the reporter's hunger, but I also saw loyalty. "Okay," I said, "but be careful. Malvern threatened me. He is not playing around." Sienna grinned. A flash of the old reckless girl I knew. "Neither am I." After lunch, I went to the public library. I needed to follow the thread my father had left me. The Hawthorne Outreach Fund. I remembered it vaguely from my childhood. Dad had been the chairman of a small charity board. They raised money for winter heating oil for low-income families. I remembered him going to meetings on Tuesday nights, but I thought it had dissolved years ago. The librarian, Mrs. Gable, helped me access the state's nonprofit database on a computer in the back corner. We searched for the name. There it was, the Hawthorne Outreach Fund. Status: active. "Active?" I whispered. I clicked on the filing history. Incorporated 1995. Annual reports filed until 2010. Then a gap. Status: dormant/administrative dissolution. But then, at the very bottom of the list, reinstatement filing, October 15th, 2025. 3 months ago, I opened the reinstatement document. The principal address had been updated. It was no longer my father's old P.O. box. It was 1400 Market Street, Suite B, Philadelphia, PA. I recognized the zip code. It was the same zip code on the Granite Vale letters. I looked at the officers listed. President: Daniel Butler. Secretary: Miles Huxley. Treasurer: redacted/agent service. My father had reinstated a dormant charity 3 months before he died. With Miles Huxley as the secretary, why? What was the charity doing? I searched for financial filings. There were none for the current year yet. But the reinstatement fee had been paid by a credit card. Cardholder: Larkspur Advisory. Larkspur Advisory. Another name I did not know. I printed the pages. The paper felt warm in my hands. This was the connection. Charity, law, debt. They were all tangled together in a knot I could not untie. I went home to a house that felt like a pressure cooker. Elaine was in the kitchen, staring at a cup of tea. Caleb was in the living room, watching sports with the volume muted. I walked into the kitchen and put the library printouts on the table. "Mom," I said. She looked up. Her eyes were rimmed with red. "Did you sign anything for Caleb?" I asked, besides the renunciation of administration. She looked at the kitchen doorway, checking for Caleb. "Ruby, please," she whispered. "Do not start. Mom, I need to know. Did you sign anything else?" She picked at the tablecloth. "He brought me papers," she said, her voice trembling. "A few days after the funeral. No, before the funeral. The day after Dad died. He said they were insurance forms. He said we needed to sign them to get the payout to cover the funeral costs. Did you read them?" I could not read them. "Ruby," she cried softly. I did not have my glasses. I was crying. "He is my son. He said it was to help. He said Dad left a mess, and he was fixing it." I took her hand. It was cold. "Mom," I said, "I think you might have signed a consent to the sale, or a guarantee for the debt." She pulled her hand away. "No," she said. "Caleb would not do that. He is in trouble. Ruby, I know that. But he loves this house. He is desperate. Mom, desperate people do terrible things." Caleb appeared in the doorway. "What are you telling her?" he demanded. I turned to him. "I am asking her what you made her sign." "Caleb, I did not make her sign anything," he shouted. "She signed the insurance forms. That is it." "Then why is Granite Vale telling me they have a consent sale agreement?" I asked. Caleb's face went white. "They are lying," he said. "They are bluffing. Or maybe you slipped a page in." I said, "Just like you did with Dad. Just a bridge loan for materials, right? Just an insurance form, right?" "Shut up," Caleb screamed. He slammed his hand against the doorframe. "You think you are so perfect. You run away to Chicago. You ignore us for years. And then you come back here and act like a detective. You do not know what it was like. Ruby, you were not here when the business started failing. You were not here when Dad got sick. I was here. I was the one driving him to appointments. I was the one trying to keep the lights on. You were gambling." "Caleb," I yelled back, "you were betting away the money meant for the bills." "I was trying to win it back," he roared. "I was trying to fix it." The room fell silent. My mother was sobbing quietly at the table. I looked at my brother. I did not see a villain. I saw a man drowning, thrashing in the water, pulling everyone down with him to stay afloat. "We are going to request a forensic review," I said quietly. Caleb froze. "What?" Nina advised it. I said, "We are going to ask the court to analyze every signature on every document, the sale authorization, the loan guarantees, the insurance forms, if you forged Dad's name, Caleb, or if you tricked Mom. The science will show it." Caleb stared at me. His eyes were wide, terrified. "You would send me to prison?" he whispered. "You would send your own brother to prison over a house?" "I am not sending you to prison," I said. "You did that yourself when you picked up the pen." He looked at Mom. She had her face buried in her hands. "Mom?" he said. "Mom, tell her to stop." Elaine did not look up. Caleb made a sound, a choked, wounded noise, and turned around. I heard the front door open and slam shut. The next morning, I met Jessa Pruitt at the house. The court order prevented her from showing the property, but she agreed to meet me off the record. She looked guilty. She stood on the porch, hugging her coat around her. "I should not be here." "Ruby," she said, "if Caleb finds out—" "He won't." I said, "Jessa, I need to know about the staging." She sighed. "It was weird." "Ruby, I will admit that—" "What was weird?" "Usually, when we list a house, we hire a stager after the contract is signed. We come in, declutter, move furniture around. It takes a week to set up. And this time, Caleb called me on the morning of the funeral. He said the stagers were already booked. He said they were coming the next day. Who were they? Pinecrest Asset Services, she said. But that is the thing. Ruby, I looked up the booking. The work order was dated January 12th. January 12th, 2 days before Dad died. They booked the staging crew before he was dead? I asked. Yes, Jessa said. And the contact person on the work order wasn't Caleb. Who was it? It was listed as client reference. L.A.L.A. I repeated. Larkspur Advisory. Jessa nodded. I have never seen a seller prep a house before the owner is even deceased. Ruby, it is like they were waiting for him to die. I spent the afternoon driving. Just driving. I drove past the high school, past the Dairy Queen where I had my first date, past the cemetery where the dirt on my father's grave was still fresh. The town felt different now. It was not just a collection of memories. It was a machine that had chewed up my father and was now coming for his home. My phone rang. It was Sienna. Her voice was breathless, tight with excitement. Ruby, where are you? Driving. I said, what did you find? I pulled the corporate veil on Larkspur Advisory, she said. It is a shell, just like we thought, but I found the registered agent, and I found the funding source. Who is it? Granite Vale is funded by a private equity pool. But Larkspur? Larkspur is the operational arm. They identify the assets. They set up the charities to gain community trust. They hire the lawyers. Who runs Larkspur? Sienna? She paused. You are not going to believe this. The principal donor for Larkspur. The money behind the curtain is linked to a local community benefactor. Who? I am still confirming the exact name on the primary deed, she said. But the trail leads to the Civic Alliance Board. It is someone big. Ruby, someone untouchable. Someone who sits on the boards of the very institutions that are supposed to protect people like your dad. The Civic Alliance, the group that funded the new park, the group that handed out scholarships. If this is true, Sienna said, this is not just about your house. This is a systemic strip mining of generational wealth in Marrow Glen. They are targeting the elderly. They are targeting the equity rich and cash poor. And they are using the town's own legal system to do it. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. Keep digging, I said. I hung up. I looked at the house on Hawthorne Ridge. It stood on the hill, stubborn and weathered. They had been planning this for months, maybe years. They had waited for my father to get sick. They had used my brother's weakness as a key to unlock the door. But they had made one mistake. They thought Ruby Butler was just another grief-stricken daughter who would sign the papers and go away. They were wrong. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. I was not going anywhere. I walked up the steps, unlocked the door, and stepped into the warmth of the home my father built. I locked the door behind me, and then, for good measure, I slid the deadbolt home. Let them come. The petition to appoint a neutral administrator hit the docket of the Bryan County Orphans Court on a Wednesday morning, by noon. The legal machinery had ground into motion, freezing the sale of the house on Hawthorne Ridge. By 2 o'clock, the entire town of Marrow Glen knew that Ruby Butler was suing her brother. In a city like Chicago, a lawsuit is just paperwork. It is a sterile, bureaucratic act filed by faceless clerks in a glass tower. But in Marrow Glen, a lawsuit is a declaration of war. It is a shout in a crowded church. It is a stain that spreads from the courthouse steps to the grocery store aisle. Coloring every interaction, I felt the shift immediately. When I walked into the post office to buy stamps, the conversation at the counter died instantly. Mrs. Gable, the librarian who had helped me just yesterday, suddenly found the floor very interesting. It was isolating. I was staying in the house I was fighting to save, sleeping down the hall from the brother I was fighting against, and taking care of the mother whose future hung in the balance. The house was a demilitarized zone. Caleb and I had stopped speaking. We moved around each other like magnets with the same polarity, pushing away whenever we got too close. He looked haggard, his face gray and unshaven. spending hours on the back porch smoking cigarettes he thought I did not know about. On Thursday, I needed to get out of the house. The silence was suffocating. I drove to the Marrow Glen Diner for lunch. It was a mistake. The diner was the heartbeat of the town. It smelled of bacon grease, weak coffee, and gossip. When I pushed open the door, the bell jangled, a cheerful sound that felt mocking. I took a booth in the back. I ordered a grilled cheese and a coffee. I felt eyes on me, not just glances, but steady, judging stares. 2 women were sitting in the booth adjacent to mine. I recognized one of them, Brenda Halloway. She had taught me 3rd grade math. She was a woman who knitted hats for newborns and baked pies for the fire department. I nodded to her. "Hello, Mrs. Halloway," I said. She looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup. Her expression was not warm. It was disappointed. "Ruby," she said. "I waited for the condolence. I waited for the, 'How are you holding up?' I heard you are blocking the sale," she said. I stiffened. "It is complicated." "Mrs. Halloway, is it?" she asked. "Caleb told the prayer circle that the bank is going to take everything if he does not sell. He said he is trying to save your mother from being homeless, and you are holding it up because you want a bigger cut of the inheritance." The words hit me like a physical slap. "A bigger cut. That is not true," I said, keeping my voice low. "Caleb is not telling you the whole story. He is here." "Ruby," she said, cutting me off. "He stayed. You left. You have been gone for 10 years. You come back for 3 days and think you know what is best for Elaine?" She shook her head and turned back to her friend. I sat there, my face burning. The waitress brought my sandwich. I stared at it. I could not eat. This was the narrative. I was the greedy, absent daughter. Caleb was the suffering, dutiful son trying to navigate a crisis. The truth, that Caleb had gambled away his future and was selling our past to cover it, was too ugly, too complex for the morning coffee clatch. It was easier to blame the outsider. I left a $20 bill on the table and walked out. I did not wait for my change. I sat in my car in the diner parking lot, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive back to Chicago and never look back. But then I thought of the lockbox. I thought of the fear in my father's handwriting. "Don't let them rush you." My phone buzzed. It was Sienna. "Ruby," she said, "I found the link." I took a deep breath, pushing the anger down. "Tell me," I said. I ran the address for Granite Vale Capital again. She said, 1400 Market Street, Suite B. It is a shared commercial suite. But here's the kicker. I cross-referenced it with the town's permit filings for the Fall Festival last year. "The Fall Festival?" I asked. "Yeah, the sponsors. You know how they put up those banners on Main Street?" I remembered. The crisp autumn air, the pumpkins, the banners fluttering from the lampposts. One of the gold-level sponsors was Larkspur Advisory. Sienna said, "They paid $5,000 for the banner." The check came from the same address, 1400 Market Street, Suite B, Larkspur Advisory. I said, "That is the name on the staging company work order." "Exactly," Sienna said. "But Ruby, think back to the funeral reception, at the Cedar Room." I closed my eyes, visualizing the room, the flowers, the food tables. There was a banner near the entrance. Sienna said, "Reception courtesy of the Friends of Marrow Glen," and in small print at the bottom, "Managed by Larkspur Advisory." A cold chill went down my spine. "They paid for the funeral reception?" I whispered. "They paid for the shrimp." "Ruby," Sienna said darkly, "they paid for the wine Caleb toasted with. They sponsored your father's wake while they were actively trying to seize his house. It was monstrous. It was a level of cynical manipulation that made me want to vomit. They were not just predatory lenders. They were embedding themselves in the community, buying goodwill with one hand while holding a knife in the other. "Who are they?" "Sienna?" I asked. "Who is running this?" "I am working on it," she said. "But Ruby, be careful. If they are sponsoring town events, they have friends in high places. They have bought the town's trust. You are going to have a hard time convincing people they are the bad guys." "I already am," I said. looking at the diner where Mrs. Halloway was drinking her coffee. I needed to see the physical connection. I needed to see where the charity met the law. I drove to the address listed for the Hawthorne Outreach Fund, the charity my father had supposedly reinstated months before his death. The address was on the outskirts of town, in a strip mall that had seen better days. Between a vape shop and a discount mattress store was a narrow storefront with a sign, Global Mail and Ship. It was a private mailbox service. I walked in. The bell on the door jingled. The air smelled of packing tape and cardboard. A teenager with blue hair was behind the counter, looking at his phone. "Can I help you?" he asked without looking up. "I am looking for a box," I said. "Box 412, the Hawthorne Outreach Fund." He tapped on his screen. "That is a corporate box," he said. "We just hold the mail. We do not give out info." I put on my best exhausted daughter face. "I know." I said, "My father was the president, Daniel Butler. He passed away this week. I am trying to settle his affairs. I just need to know if the box is being checked." The kid looked up. He saw my red eyes. He softened. "Sorry about your dad," he said. He glanced at the screen again. "Yeah, it is active." He said, "Someone picks up the mail once a week. Is it my father?" I asked. "Older guy? Heavyset?" "No." The kid said, "It is a younger guy. Drives a nice car, always wears a suit. Do you know his name?" The kid shrugged. "He signs for the registered mail as—" "Let me see." He clicked a few times. "Agent for service." He read, "But the last time he came in, he was complaining about the parking. Said he was late for a meeting at the courthouse. He left a card on the counter by accident. I think it is still here." He rummaged through a drawer full of rubber bands and loose change. He pulled out a white business card and slid it across the glass counter. I picked it up. Huxley and Crow Legal Group, Jason Vane, Associate Attorney. I stared at the card. Jason Vane, an associate at Miles Huxley's firm, was picking up the mail for my father's charity. "Thank you." I said, "You have no idea how helpful this is." I walked out to the car. The triangle was complete. Larkspur Advisory funded Granite Vale. Larkspur Advisory paid for the funeral. Larkspur Advisory used the same address as the charity, and the charity's mail was being collected by Huxley and Crow. It was a closed loop, a perfect ecosystem of debt and control, designed to strip assets under the guise of legal aid and community service. I went back to the house. I could not face Caleb, so I went straight to Dad's office. I started going through the piles of paper on the floor. I was looking for anything related to Pinecrest Asset Services. Jessa, the realtor, had told me they were booked to stage the house on January 12th. I found a stack of receipts under a heavy bronze paperweight. Most were for lumber and hardware, but near the bottom, I found a carbon copy of an estimate. It was dated December 20th, 2025. Project, 424 Hawthorne Ridge Road. Client, D. Butler. Scope, master bath renovation/roof repair. My father had been planning to renovate. He wasn't planning to sell. You do not fix a roof or redo a bathroom if you're about to hand the keys to a liquidator, but stapled to the back of the estimate was a receipt. Payment received, $500, date, January 10th, 2026. Payee, Pinecrest Asset Services, memo, consultation/pre-listing prep. I stared at the receipt. The handwriting on the check number line was not my father's. It was smoother, loopy. It was Caleb's handwriting. On January 10th, 4 days before Dad supposedly signed the sale authorization, Caleb had paid Pinecrest to consult on listing the house. Dad was planning a renovation to stay. Caleb was paying a staging company to sell. And the receipt was made out to Pinecrest, the same company Jessa said was booked by Larkspur. Caleb was working with them. He wasn't just reacting to debt. He was coordinating with the people who held the debt. My phone rang. It was Nina. "Ruby, are you sitting down?" "I am at the desk." I said, "I got the hospital records." She said, "The judge granted the limited order for the admission timestamps. And? Your father was admitted to Ridgeview Medical Center on January 14th At 8:15 in the morning, she said. He was in the cardiac observation unit until 5 p.m. I looked at the picture of the sale authorization on my laptop screen. What time was the document notarized? I asked, though I already knew. The notary stamp says 10:30 a.m., Nina said, and the location of the notary is listed as the Huxley and Crow office on Main Street. I let out a breath I had been holding for days. He could not have been there. I said, exactly, Nina said, unless your father telephoned himself out of a cardiac unit, drove to a law office, signed a document, and drove back without the hospital noticing. That signature is a physical impossibility. It is a forgery. I said, it is a proven forgery. Nina corrected, and since it was notarized by a staff member at Huxley and Crow, it implicates the firm. Ruby, this is the smoking gun. We can void the sale authorization. We can strip Caleb of his administrator status immediately. Do it. I said, I am drafting the motion now. She said, but Ruby, if we file this, it goes nuclear. Caleb could be arrested. Miles Huxley could be disbarred. They will come at you with everything they have. They are already coming at me. Nina, file it. I hung up. I picked up the Pinecrest receipt. I picked up the hospital timeline notes. I walked into the living room. Caleb was there. He was packing a box. Books? Knickknacks? What are you doing? I asked. I am packing, he said, not looking at me. We have to be ready to move. Ruby, even with the injunction, we cannot afford this place. Stop packing, I said. He kept putting books in the box. We have to be realistic, he muttered. I walked over and kicked the box. It slid across the floor. Books spilling out. I said, stop. He spun around. His face flushed with anger. What is your problem? My problem is that you are a liar. Caleb, and not a very good one. I held up the papers. I know about the hospital. I said, Dad was in the cardiac unit at 10:30 on the 14th. He was not at Huxley's office signing your sale authorization. Caleb's face went slack. And I know about Pinecrest, I continued. Stepping closer, I found the receipt. You paid them on the 10th. You were planning to sell the house 4 days before you claimed Dad agreed to it. You were planning this while he was still alive and fighting to keep it. Caleb backed up until his legs hit the sofa. He sat down heavily. He put his head in his hands. I did not have a choice, he whispered. There is always a choice. Caleb, you chose to betray him. You do not understand, he shouted. Looking up, there were tears in his eyes. It was not just the gambling. It started that way. But then I tried to fix it. How? I asked. I took a bridge loan, he said. Not from a bank, from a private fund. I thought I could flip a property in the next county. A sure thing. My buddy told me about it. Which buddy? It does not matter, he said. But the deal fell through, and the loan was secured against my future inheritance. I stared at him. You borrowed against Dad's death? I did not think he was going to die, Caleb cried. The contract said the collateral was my expectancy interest in the estate. I thought I would pay it back before anything happened. Who gave you the loan? Caleb? He wiped his nose with his sleeve. Granite Vale, he said. But who introduced you? Who told you it was a good idea? Caleb hesitated. He looked at the window, as if checking for listeners. Miles Huxley, he whispered. I felt the room tilt. Huxley? I asked. Dad's lawyer? He wasn't acting as Dad's lawyer. Caleb said. He was just offering advice. He saw I was stressed about the debts. He said he knew a fund that helped people in transition. He set up the meeting with Malvern. He told me it was a standard financial tool. I felt a cold, hard rage crystallize in my chest. It was a setup. I said, they did not just find you. Caleb, they groomed you. Huxley knew Dad was property rich and cash poor. He knew you were the weak link. He encouraged you to take a loan you could never pay back, secured by the house, so that when the interest exploded, they would have a legal claim to the property. Caleb looked at me, his eyes wide and childlike. I never meant to hurt Dad. He said, I just wanted to get out of the hole. And when the hole got too deep? I asked. They told me the only way out was to sell. he said. They said if I got the house listed with their preferred partner, Pinecrest, they would forgive the penalties. They said they would handle the paperwork. They handed me the authorization. Ruby, they told me Dad had already agreed to it verbally, but he hadn't. I said, "No," Caleb whispered. "He hadn't. I signed it. I signed his name." I was so scared. "Ruby, Malvern said they would garnish my wages for the rest of my life." I looked at my brother. He was a fool, a broken, desperate fool, but he was also a victim. Miles Huxley, a man sworn to uphold the law, had led him to the slaughter. "We are going to fix this," I said, "but not by selling the house." I drove to Huxley and Crow. I did not make an appointment. I walked past the receptionist. Ignoring her protests, I walked straight to Miles Huxley's office and opened the door. He was on the phone. He looked up, annoyed, and covered the receiver. "Ruby, this is highly irregular." I walked to his desk and slammed the hospital records down on the mahogany. "January 14th. I said, 10:30 in the morning. Dad was hooked up to an EKG at Ridgeview. Your notary stamp says he was here." Miles looked at the paper. He did not flinch. He did not panic. He slowly hung up the phone. He picked up the document and studied it. "Administrative error," he said calmly. "It is forgery, Miles, and it is fraud. And since your employee notarized it, it is a felony for you. 2. He sat back in his chair, tenting his fingers. He looked at me with a gaze that was almost admiring. "You are very persistent. Ruby, I know about the bridge loan." I said, "I know you introduced Caleb to Granite Vale. I know you are the secretary of the Hawthorne Outreach Fund, which shares an address with Larkspur. I know the whole dirty ecosystem." He smiled. It was a cold, thin smile. "And what do you plan to do with this information? Go to the police? The local police chief is my golf partner. Go to the bar association? I sit on the ethics committee. I will go to the judge." I said, "I will go to the Marrow Glen Ledger." Miles sighed. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file. "Ruby, let us be practical. You have a career in Chicago. You have a life. Do you really want to spend the next 2 years in depositions? Do you want your brother's gambling addiction splashed across the front page? Do you want your mother to know that her son stole her security?" He slid a piece of paper across the desk. "Drop the injunction," he said. "Allow the sale to proceed to Pinecrest. In exchange, Granite Vale will waive the entire debt. We will set up an annuity for your mother. She will be comfortable. Caleb will be clear. And the family name remains spotless. It was a bribe, a clean, elegant bribe. And if I refuse?" Miles leaned forward. "Then we release the file on Caleb. We prosecute him for the forgery you just uncovered. He goes to prison, Ruby, for 5 to 10 years, and your mother loses the house anyway to pay for his defense." I stared at him. He was using my own discovery as a weapon. "You are a monster." I said, "I am a realist," he said. "The house is gone. Ruby, the only question is whether you want to save your brother or sacrifice him." I picked up the hospital records. "I will see you in court." Miles, I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long purple shadows across the snow. I found Mom in the sunroom. She was sitting in the dark. "Ruby?" she asked. "Mom," I said, sitting beside her. "We need to talk." She took my hand. "I heard you shouting at Caleb." She said, "He told me the truth. Mom, about the loan, about the forgery." She squeezed my hand. "I know." She whispered, "You know? Dad told me." She said, "Before he died, he found the papers in Caleb's truck. He confronted him. Why didn't you tell me?" I was ashamed. She said, "Ashamed that we raised a son who could do this. And Dad was terrified. Of the debt?" "No." She said, "Of the people holding it. He told me, Elaine, they do not just want the money. They want the land. They want the Hawthorne block." "The block?" Dad said they were buying up the neighbors. Too quietly. He said if Caleb fell, the whole ridge would fall. She looked at me, her eyes clear for the first time in days. He said, "If anything happens to me, Ruby will see it." I felt a lump in my throat. He said that? He said, Ruby is the only one who can stand up to them. She is the steel in this family. I put my head on her shoulder. I did not feel like steel. I felt like glass, ready to shatter. We are going to fight them. Mom, I said. But Caleb might get in trouble. Better he faces the trouble he made than runs from it his whole life. She said, Dad would want the truth. Ruby, even if it hurts. I went to the front door to lock up for the night. On the porch, lying on the doormat, was a thick manila envelope. There was no stamp, no return address. It had been hand-delivered. I picked it up. It was heavy. I brought it into the kitchen and opened it under the light. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document. The Butler Home Preservation Trust, dated January 5th, 2026. My heart stopped. January 5th, 9 days before the forgery, 9 days before he died. I turned the page. Settler, Daniel Edward Butler. Trustee, Ruby Elaine Butler. Me. He had named me the trustee. I scanned the text. It transferred the deed of the house into the trust. If this document was valid, the house was not part of the estate. Caleb had no authority to sell it. The will did not matter. But as I turned to the next page, I stopped. The document ended abruptly. The schedule of assets, the page that listed the house specifically, was missing, and the signature page. The signature page was torn. I could see the top of the letters Dan, but the rest was ripped away. I looked inside the envelope. There was a small index card. Typed on it were 3 words, I have the rest. I stared at the card. Someone had the original. Someone knew. Was it a friend? Or was it another trap? I ran my thumb over the text. Trustee, Ruby Elaine Butler. My father had done it. He had tried to save us. He had put the weapon in my hand, but someone else was holding the ammunition. I looked out the window at the dark driveway. Who are you? I thought. And then, for the first time since the funeral, I smiled, a grim, dangerous smile, because now I knew the trust existed, and if it existed, I would find it. And when I did, I would burn Miles Huxley's world to the ground. The filing of the motion to compel was not a polite legal maneuver. It was an act of war. When Nina Carraway walked into the Protha Notary's office and slapped down the request for full trust disclosure, along with subpoenas for Huxley and Crow, Marrow Glen Community Bank, and Pinecrest Asset Services, the shockwave was almost immediate. We were no longer dealing with a grieving family and a helpful lawyer. We were dealing with fraud, conspiracy, and a cover-up that reached into the deepest pockets of the town. I spent the morning at Nina's office, watching her draft the subpoena riders. She was in her element, her eyes sharp, her movements precise. This is going to get ugly. Ruby, she said, not looking up from her screen. Huxley is going to fight the subpoena on privilege grounds. The bank is going to claim privacy statutes. And Pinecrest? They might just shred everything before we get there. Let them try, I said. We have the cover page. We know the trust exists, but we do not have the schedule of assets. Nina reminded me. That is the Holy Grail. Without the page listing the house, they can still argue the trust was empty. I touched the pocket of my coat, where I kept the index card from the mysterious envelope. I have the rest. Someone out there was watching. Someone was feeding me breadcrumbs. But for now, we had to fight with what we had. The retaliation came at noon. I was at the house, trying to organize the chaos of paperwork on the dining room table, when a courier van pulled up. A man in a brown uniform marched up the steps and taped a notice to the front door. He did not knock. He just taped it and left. I opened the door and peeled the paper off the wood. It was a notice of intent to file a lien. Creditor, Granite Vale Capital. Debtor, Caleb Butler. Property, 424 Hawthorne Ridge Road. I read the fine print. They were not waiting for the probate court. They were claiming that because Caleb had acted as the apparent agent of the estate when he took the bridge loan, the estate was liable. They were threatening to cloud the title so badly that no trust, no will, and no judge could clear it for years. And there was a second letter, addressed to Caleb personally. I walked into the kitchen where Caleb was staring into a cup of black coffee. "This came for you?" I said, sliding the envelope across the table. He opened it. His hands were shaking so badly he tore the paper. He read it, and all the color drained from his face. "They are going to garnish my wages," he whispered. "What?" "They are filing a motion to attach my earnings," he said. 50%. Ruby. And they are threatening to contact my employer to disclose the criminal nature of the debt. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with panic. "I will lose my job," he said. "I work in logistics. If they find out I have a gambling debt this size, I am a security risk. I will be fired by Friday. It is a tactic." "Caleb," I said, "they are trying to break you. They want you to panic and sign the consent decree." "It is working," he shouted. "I cannot lose my job. Ruby, it is the only thing I have left. Then help me fight them," I said. He put his head on the table. "I cannot," he muffled. "They have everything. Texts, emails. They own me. They only own you if you let them," I said. I left him there, sobbing quietly into the formica, and went to call Nina. "They are racing the clock," Nina said when I told her. "They know the hearing is next week. They want to make the house so legally radioactive that we give up just to stop the bleeding. It is called a scorched earth strategy. How do we stop it? We prove the debt is invalid," she said, "and we prove the house never belonged to the estate in the first place." My phone buzzed. It was Todd Mercer from the bank. "Ruby," he said. His voice was tight. "I just got served with the subpoena. I know." "Todd." "I can talk now," he said. "Officially. Can you come in?" I was there in 10 minutes. Todd looked different than he had a few days ago. The fear was gone, replaced by a grim professional resolve. He closed the door to his office and locked it. He turned his monitor around. "Here is the file," he said. "The one I told you about." I looked at the screen. Account name: the Butler Home Preservation Trust. Opened January 5th, 2026. Funding: $100. It exists. I breathed. It exists. Todd confirmed. "Your father came in on the 5th. He was agitated. He set up the trust instrument with $100 just to activate it. He told me the deed to the house was being transferred into it that afternoon. Did he bring the deed?" I asked. "No." Todd said, "He said the lawyer was handling the recording." "Which lawyer?" He did not say. Todd said, "But Ruby, look at the access log." He pointed to a list of dates and times at the bottom of the screen. Inquiry: January 15th, 2026. Online banking. Inquiry: January 16th, 2026. Telephone support. Inquiry: January 20th, 2026. Branch visit. Declined. "Who made these inquiries?" I asked. "The online attempt used Caleb's username and password." Todd said, "But the account is not linked to Caleb's profile. It is linked to the trustee." "Me?" "Exactly," Todd said. "The system blocked him. Then he called support, pretending to be your father. The voice authentication flagged it as a mismatch." "And the branch visit?" Todd sighed. "That was Caleb. He said he came in with a document, a power of attorney, the one from Huxley?" "Yes," Todd said. "He tried to access the trust account. He said he needed to close it to consolidate estate assets. I told him a power of attorney does not override a trust unless the trust specifically allows it. I refused to give him access. Did he say anything?" "He was on the phone with someone." Todd said, "He walked out to the lobby and made a call. I heard him say, 'It is locked. She is the only one who can open it.'" "Who was he talking to?" "I do not know," Todd said, but he looked terrified. I stared at the screen. January 5th, the day after the note said Dad met with Huxley. "Can you print this?" I asked. "The access log?" Todd hit a button. The printer whirred. "This proves Caleb knew about the trust." I said, "He knew he could not sell the house because it was in the trust. So he tried to dissolve the trust before I found out about it. He failed." Todd said, handing me the paper, "But Ruby, if the deed was never recorded." Then the house is still in his name. I finished. And the trust is just an empty bucket. That was the catch. Dad had set up the bucket, but had he moved the water? I walked out of the bank and saw a newspaper box on the corner. The Marrow Glen Ledger. The headline was below the fold, but it was bold. Predatory lending shadows loom over local estates. By Sienna Hart. I bought a copy and stood on the sidewalk, reading it in the cold wind. Sienna had been careful. She did not name the Butlers. She did not name Granite Vale. But the details were unmistakable to anyone who lived here. A pattern of high-interest bridge loans targeting equity-rich families in crisis. Allegations of legal professionals facilitating these loans for undisclosed fees, a local charity address linked to offshore funding groups. It was a warning shot. I walked to the diner to get a coffee. I needed the caffeine. As I walked in, the conversation stopped. Again. But this time, the energy was different. It was not just judgment. It was curiosity. I went to the counter. The waitress, a woman named Barb, who had worked there for 20 years, poured my coffee, read the article. She said, her voice low. I looked at her. And? My cousin lost her farm last year. Barb said. Same thing. Bridge loan. Fees. Lawyer said she had to sell. She lost everything. She pushed a sugar dispenser toward me. You give 'em hell. Ruby, she whispered. I felt a sudden, sharp stinging in my eyes. I nodded. I turned to leave. At a booth near the door, Mrs. Halloway, the woman who had snubbed me days ago, was reading the paper. She looked up at me. She did not smile, but she gave a small, curt nod. I was no longer just the greedy daughter from Chicago. I was the woman holding the line. I went back to the house and went straight to the filing cabinet in the basement. I needed to find the insurance policy. If Dad had transferred the house to the trust, he would have had to update the homeowner's insurance. I dug through years of old statements, 1999, 2010. Then I found it, a letter from the insurance agent, dated December 28th, policy change confirmation. I scanned the document. Insured, Daniel Edward Butler. Additional insured, the Butler Home Preservation Trust. Beneficiary, Ruby Elaine Butler. Trustee, he had changed it, 2 weeks before he died. You do not insure a house in the name of a trust if you are planning to sell it. You insure it because you are planning to keep it. Forever. This was intent. This was proof that the sale authorization Caleb produced was a fabrication. A man does not secure his home in a trust on December 28th and then agree to liquidate it on January 14th. I took a picture of the document and sent it to Nina. We have intent. I typed, that evening. The tension in the house finally snapped. I was in the kitchen, cooking pasta. It was a mundane act in the middle of a war zone. Caleb came in. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were red, his hands shaking as he poured a glass of water. The seminar, I said. He stopped. The glass clinked against the counter. What? You said Huxley introduced you to the lender. I said, stirring the sauce. But it was not a private introduction. Was it? It was a seminar. Caleb turned slowly. How did you know? Sienna found a flyer. I lied. She didn't. But I knew how these things worked. Caleb slumped against the refrigerator. It was at the Rotary Club, he said. Last November, Wealth Management for the Next Generation. Miles Huxley was the keynote speaker. He talked about leveraging assets, about how the older generation holds on to equity that could be used to build new businesses. He talked about how to get your parents' money before they die. I said, no. Caleb said, not like that. He made it sound smart. He said we could unlock the value of the house to invest in the market. He introduced me to Malvern afterward. They bought me a drink. They told me I had a good head for business. They saw a mark. Caleb, I know, he shouted. He slid down the fridge until he was sitting on the floor. I know that now. But back then, I felt important. Ruby, Dad always treated me like a kid. He never let me handle the books. He never listened to my ideas. Huxley listened. Malvern listened. They listened because they wanted to steal the roof over your head. I said. Caleb put his head in his hands and began to weep. Not the angry, defensive crying of before. This was the deep, racking sobs of a man who realizes he has destroyed the only thing that matters. I just wanted to prove I could do it. He choked out. I wanted to pay off the gambling debts and then show Dad a check for $50,000. I wanted him to be proud of me. He looked up at me, his face wet with tears. He knew. Ruby. He knew I was a failure. That is why he called you. That is why he made the trust. He did not make the trust because you are a failure. Caleb, I said, kneeling beside him, he made it because he loved you. He wanted to protect the house from you, so you would always have a place to live. Caleb looked at me, stunned. He wasn't cutting you out. I said, he was building a wall around you. Caleb closed his eyes. I signed the papers, he whispered. I really signed them. I'm going to jail. Maybe, I said, but if you testify, if you tell the judge exactly how Huxley groomed you, it might save you. He looked at me. The fear was still there, but something else was breaking through. Resignation. I cannot let Mom lose the house. He said. We looked up. Mom was standing in the doorway. She was wearing her bathrobe. She looked frail, but her chin was high. I will sign it, she said. We both looked at her. Sign what? Mom, I asked. The statement. She said, for the judge. She walked into the room and sat at the table. She placed her hands flat on the surface. I will tell the judge that I was confused, she said. I will tell him that I did not understand what I was signing when I renounced the administration. I will tell him that I felt pressured. Mom, I said gently, if you do that, people will talk. They will say you are senile, or that you are weak. Let them talk, she said. She looked at Caleb. I let this happen, she said. I saw you struggling, Caleb. I saw the letters from the collection agencies. I hid them. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. I failed your father. No. Mom, Caleb said. I did this. We all did it, Elaine said. We let the silence take over. But I am done being quiet. She looked at me. Call your lawyer. Ruby, I want to make a statement. The next morning, Nina called me with a breakthrough. We got the deposition from the Pinecrest manager. She said, he cracked. What did he say? He admitted that Pinecrest was hired by Larkspur Advisory. She said, but here's the smoking gun. The work order instructions. Read them to me. Scope. Prepare asset for immediate liquidation. Remove personal effects. Secure lockbox. And then this note. Client requests aggressive timeline. Occupants to be vacated by January 30th. January 30th. I said, that is tomorrow. They plan to kick your mother out 3 days after the funeral, Nina said. My blood ran cold. And Ruby? Nina continued. The manager admitted something else. He said they were given a key. A key to the house? Yes. He said it was provided by the referring attorney. Huxley gave them a key to my parents' house while my father was still alive. That is breaking and entering. I said, that is conspiracy. It is everything. Nina said, I am adding it to the witness list. The hearing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Are we ready? We have the timeline conflict. Nina said, we have the trust account. We have the insurance policy. We have Caleb's admission, if he sticks to it, and now we have Pinecrest. We have a strong case. Ruby. But we still do not have the original trust document, she said. Without that schedule of assets, the judge could still rule that the house is part of the estate, and if it is part of the estate, the debts attached to it. So we win the battle but lose the war. I said, we need that document. Ruby. I spent the rest of the day prepping Caleb. He was terrified, but he was holding it together. We went over his testimony, the seminar, the introduction to Malvern, the pressure, the fake authorization. It was grueling. By 8 p.m., we were both exhausted. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. My phone was on the counter. The message light was blinking. I had missed a call while I was in the shower. I checked the log. Unknown number. I pressed play. There was a crackle of static, then a voice I knew better than my own. Ruby. I dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor. Shards flying everywhere. I didn't move. Ruby, if you are hearing this, it started. My father's voice. Rough, tired, the way he sounded in the hospital. I gave the papers to the one person who cannot be bought, but you have to find them. I hid them where we used to hide from the world. There was a pause, a heavy, wheezing breath. Do not trust the suits. Rubes, trust the foundation. I love you. Kiddo. The line went dead. I stood in the middle of the broken glass, my heart hammering like a trapped bird, where we used to hide from the world. He had recorded it. He had a contingency plan. The one person who cannot be bought. Who was that? In a town where everyone seemed to be for sale. Who was left? And where we used to hide. I closed my eyes, searching my childhood memories. The treehouse? Gone. The basement? Searched. Trust the foundation. Was he talking about the House Foundation? Or the Hawthorne Outreach Fund? I looked at the phone. The timestamp on the voicemail was from a scheduled delivery service. He had set it up to send if he didn't cancel it. A dead man's switch. He knew. He knew he might not make it. I grabbed the broom and started sweeping up the glass. The hearing was in 12 hours. I didn't have the document, but I had a clue. Where we used to hide. I thought about the games we played when I was little. Hide and seek. Where did I always hide? The attic. Behind the chimney stack, I stopped sweeping. The foundation. Not the House Foundation. The cornerstone. The cornerstone of the Marrow Glen Public Library. My father had built that library. It was his proudest project. He always said, "That building is the only thing I built that will last forever." And when we were kids, we used to hide in the little reading nook behind the reference section. He called it our bunker. I gave the papers to the one person who cannot be bought, Mrs. Gable, the librarian, the one who had helped me find the charity filings, the one who looked at the floor when I walked into the post office. She wasn't snubbing me. She was hiding something. I looked at the clock. It was 9 p.m. The library was closed, but the hearing was at 9 a.m. I had to get into that library. I grabbed my coat. "Where are you going?" Caleb asked. "Coming into the kitchen, to find the rest of the story," I said. The Bryer County Probate Court smelled of floor wax and old decisions. It was a smell I remembered from childhood field trips, a scent that was supposed to inspire reverence but now just made my stomach turn. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Nina Caraway. My hands were folded on the scarred oak surface. I was trying to stop them from shaking. On the other side of the aisle sat Caleb. He looked small in his suit, slumped over as if his spine had dissolved. Next to him was Miles Huxley. Miles looked impeccable. He was checking his watch, projecting an air of a busy man inconvenienced by a hysterical woman. Behind the bar, the gallery was full. Marrow Glen had turned out. I felt their eyes on the back of my neck. Mrs. Halloway was there. Jessa Pruitt was there. Sienna Hart sat in the front row. A notepad open on her knee, Judge Silas Vance entered. He was a man with a face like a dried apple and eyes that missed nothing. "All rise." The bailiff droned. We stood. We sat. The war began. "Your Honor." Nina began, standing up. She didn't use big words. She didn't pace. She just laid a piece of paper on the podium. "We are here to contest the validity of an expedited sale authorization purportedly signed by the decedent, Daniel Butler, on January 14th, 2026. We are also here to petition for the removal of Caleb Butler as interim administrator due to gross mismanagement and conflict of interest." Miles Huxley stood up, smiling. "Your Honor, this is a simple case of a family dispute spilling into your courtroom. The daughter, who has been absent for a decade, is unhappy with the difficult decisions her brother had to make to save the estate from insolvency. State your evidence, Ms. Caraway," Judge Vance said, ignoring Huxley's charm. Nina picked up the hospital records. "Exhibit A," she said. the medical records of Daniel Butler from Ridgeview Medical Center. She walked the papers to the bench. On January 14th, Daniel Butler was admitted to the cardiac observation unit at 8:15 in the morning. He remained monitored, without break, until 5 o'clock that evening. She turned to point at Huxley. The sale authorization document submitted by Mr. Butler and notarized by a staff member of Huxley & Crow is time-stamped 10:30 in the morning. The location of the notary is listed as the law firm's office on Main Street. A murmur went through the gallery, unless Daniel Butler had the ability to bilocate. Nina said, her voice cutting through the noise. He could not have signed this document in Mr. Huxley's office. The signature is a physical impossibility. It is a forgery. Huxley didn't flinch. He stood up. Your Honor, clerical errors happen. The date might have been keyed in wrong by a secretary. That does not invalidate the intent of the deceased. Intent? Nina countered. She picked up another stack of papers. Let us talk about intent. Exhibit B. She held up the Pinecrest Asset Services work order. This is a contract to stage the home for liquidation. It is dated January 12th, 2 days before the alleged authorization was signed, and it was ordered by a third party, Larkspur Advisory. She looked at the judge. Why was a consulting firm hiring a staging crew for a house that was not yet for sale, owned by a man who was not yet dead? Judge Vance looked at Huxley. Mr. Huxley? The judge asked. Do you have an explanation for why your firm's associate was picking up mail for a charity linked to this same advisory group? Huxley buttoned his jacket. We represent many corporate clients. Your Honor, Larkspur is a reputable firm. They were assisting the family with asset protection. Protection? Nina asked. She turned to the gallery. She held up the bank log. Exhibit C. This is an access log from Marrow Glen Community Bank. It shows repeated attempts by Caleb Butler to access a trust account using his father's credentials. When that failed, he tried to use a power of attorney to close the trust. This happened days after his father's death. She lowered the paper. This is not protection. Your Honor, this is a raid. Then it was my turn. I took the stand. The wooden chair was hard. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw my mother in the second row. She was wearing black. She looked terrified, but she gave me a tiny, trembling nod. Ms. Butler, Miles Huxley said, approaching the stand. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a grandfather. You live in Chicago, correct? Yes, I said. For how long? 10 years. And in those 10 years, how often did you visit your father? Maybe once a year, I said. Once a year. Huxley repeated. So, for 360 days a year, you were not here. You did not see the bills piling up on his desk. You did not see the stress in his eyes. You were busy. I felt the shame prickle, hot and familiar. I was working. I said, you were escaping. Huxley corrected softly. You left a chaotic family dynamic because you found it draining. Is that fair to say? Objection. Nina called out. Argumentative. Sustained. Judge Vance said. Move on. Mr. Huxley. Huxley smiled. You claim your father wanted to keep the house. He said, but you were not here to hear him talk about his debts. You were not here when he told Caleb he was drowning. Isn't it true, Ms. Butler, that you are projecting your own guilt about leaving onto your brother's attempt to fix a mess you ignored? The room was silent. It was a good narrative, the selfish city daughter versus the dutiful country son. I took a breath. I looked Huxley in the eye. I left. I said clearly, you are right. I left because the chaos was constant. I left because I could not fix them, and it hurt to watch. I looked at Caleb. He was staring at his shoes, but I came back. I said, I came back because my father called me. He left me a note. He told me not to let you rush me. I turned to the judge. I may have been absent. Your Honor, I own that. But my father knew that when the chips were down, I would tell the truth. He knew I would not forge a signature. He knew I would not sell his legacy to a shell company to cover a gambling debt. I am here now, and I am telling you that my father did not agree to this sale. He was fighting it until the moment his heart stopped. Huxley stared at me for a long moment. He saw he wasn't going to break me. "No further questions," he said stiffly. Then they called Caleb. He walked to the stand like a man walking to the gallows. He swore to tell the truth. He sat down. "Mr. Butler," Nina asked, "did you sign your father's name to the sale authorization?" The room held its breath. Caleb looked at Huxley. Huxley stared back, his face a mask of warning. Then Caleb looked at Mom. "Yes," Caleb whispered. "Louder. Please," Nina said. "Yes," Caleb said, his voice cracking. "I signed it." "Why?" "Because I was scared," he said. He started to cry. Quiet, ugly sobs. "I owed money, a lot of money, to Granite Vale. They said they would take everything. They said if I sold the house, the debt would be wiped clean." "Who told you that?" Nina asked. "Drew Malvern," Caleb said. "And Mr. Huxley." Huxley shot up. "Objection. Hearsay. Overruled." The judge barked. "Continue. Mr. Butler, Mr. Huxley told me it was a standard bridge loan," Caleb said, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "He introduced me to them. He told me Dad was too old to understand the finance part. He said I needed to be the man of the house. He looked at me then. His eyes were raw. I tried to make Ruby the responsible one again," he said. "I wanted her to come back and stop it. Or I wanted her to fix it. I wanted it to be over. I am sorry. Ruby." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just offered the apology like a stone he was laying down. It was pathetic. And it was the most honest thing Caleb had done in his life, during the recess. Sienna rushed up to the railing. Her face was flushed. "Ruby, Nina," she whispered. "I found the connection." She handed Nina a tablet. "I ran a deeper search on Larkspur Advisory's funding," she said. "It is layered deep, but I found the initial capital injection for their community projects." She pointed to a name on the screen. "The Pell Family Foundation." "Gordon Pell?" I asked. "The guy who runs the Civic Alliance?" "The guy who is currently paying for the renovation of this courthouse." Sienna said, "He sits on the zoning board. He sits on the hospital board. That is why no one talks," Nina said. Realizing the scope of it, "It is not just a predatory lender, it is the town patriarch. He is using Granite Vale to strip assets from families he thinks are failing. And then he revitalizes the properties to boost his own portfolio. He thinks he is cleaning up the town. He is eating the town." I said. Nina took the tablet. "Can I use this?" she asked. "It is public record now." Sienna said, "I just hit publish on the website." We went back in. Nina stood up. She looked different now, dangerous. "Your Honor," she said, "we have heard testimony of forgery. We have heard testimony of coercion. But the court must understand the engine driving this." She held up the tablet. "The entity driving this sale, Larkspur Advisory, is funded by the Pell Family Foundation. This is a coordinated effort to seize property under the guise of debt collection, orchestrated by individuals with significant influence over local institutions." Judge Vance froze. He knew Gordon Pell. Everyone knew Gordon Pell. Nina didn't let him interrupt. "And finally, Your Honor, we submit this." She pulled out the single page I had received in the envelope. The trust cover page, Exhibit D, a copy of the Butler Home Preservation Trust. Dated January 5th, it lists Ruby Butler as the successor trustee. This proves Daniel Butler had no intention of selling. He intended to place the home in trust. Huxley laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "This is a photocopy of a cover page. Your Honor, it is incomplete. It has no schedule of assets. It has a torn signature. It is worthless. It is evidence of intent," Nina argued. "It is evidence of nothing," Huxley shouted, losing his cool for the first time. Without the original document, without the schedule proving the house was funded into the trust, the property remains in the estate, and the estate is insolvent. Judge Vance slammed his gavel. "Enough!" The room fell silent. The judge looked at Huxley. Then he looked at Caleb. Then he looked at the partial trust document. "Mr. Huxley," the judge said, his voice ice cold, "you are an officer of this court. You have a witness testifying that you facilitated a predatory loan and advised a forgery. You have a conflict of interest that is frankly staggering. He turned to the defense table. I am issuing an immediate temporary injunction. No assets of the Butler estate are to be sold, transferred, or encumbered. He looked at Nina. However, the court cannot rule on the validity of a trust based on a single photocopy. Ms. Caraway, you have 48 hours to produce the original instrument and the schedule of assets. If you cannot, the property reverts to the estate, and we will proceed with the insolvency hearings. He banged the gavel again, and Mr. Malvern, Drew Malvern, who had been sitting in the back row, stood up. If your firm attempts to contact any member of the Butler family again, I will hold you in contempt. Do I make myself clear? Crystal, Your Honor, court is adjourned. It was a win, but it felt like we were standing on a trap door. We walked out onto the courthouse steps. The winter sun was blinding. Huxley swept past us, talking rapidly into his phone. He didn't look at me. Malvern was nowhere to be seen. Mom grabbed my arm. She was shaking. Is it over? She asked. Not yet. Mom, I said, we stopped the sale. But we need to find that paper. Caleb came out last. He stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at us. He didn't come down. He lit a cigarette, his hand trembling, and looked out at the town square. He looked lonely. I walked down to the sidewalk. People were watching, but the glare was gone. They looked unsure. The narrative had cracked. Sienna was waiting by my car. Pella's going to be furious, she said. You just poked the bear. Ruby? Good. I said, let him wake up. I drove Mom home. We didn't talk much. She was exhausted, the adrenaline dump leaving her frail. I made her tea and put her to bed. The house was quiet. Caleb hadn't come home. I sat in the kitchen. 48 hours. I had the key. Mrs. Gable at the library had given me a look when I asked about my father. She hadn't spoken, but she had slid a book across the counter, The History of Marrow Glen. I had opened it in the car. Inside the hollowed-out spine was a small brass key and a note. He said you would know where to look. He said it was the foundation. I had thought she meant the library foundation, but when I held the key, I recognized it. It wasn't a door key. It was a padlock key, and I remembered the toolbox. My father had an old red toolbox. It was battered, covered in paint splatters. He kept it in the basement, on the workbench. It was the first thing he ever taught me to use. The foundation of good work, he used to say, is keeping your tools sharp. I ran down the basement stairs. The air was cold and smelled of sawdust. The workbench was cluttered with unfinished projects. The red toolbox was there. I tried to lift it. It was heavy. I opened the lid. Hammers, wrenches, screwdrivers. I emptied it. I took every tool out, laying them on the bench. The bottom of the box was metal, scratched, oily metal. I felt around the edges. There was a seam. I used a flathead screwdriver to pry at the corner. The false bottom popped up. Underneath was a flat, gray metal box, a lockbox. The key from the library fit perfectly. I turned it. The lock clicked. I opened the lid. Inside was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out. My hands were shaking. I slid the contents onto the workbench. There it was, the Butler Home Preservation Trust. Original instrument. I turned the pages. Schedule A. Assets. 1. Real property located at 424 Hawthorne Ridge Road, Marrow Glen, Pennsylvania. And behind it, the deed, the original deed, stamped and recorded. He had done it. He hadn't just written the trust. He had funded it. He had recorded the deed himself, likely driving to the county seat in the next county to bypass the local clerks who reported to Huxley. But there was more. Under the trust document was a black notebook. I opened it. It was a log, a detailed, meticulous log of every interaction. November 12th. Huxley pitched the bridge loan. Felt wrong. Too eager. November 20th. Saw Caleb leaving Granite Vale office. He looked sick. December 1st. Confronted Caleb. He denied it. But I know. December 15th. Started moving assets. If they want to fight, I will give them a war. January 4th. Huxley threatened me. The town needs progress. Daniel, don't stand in the way. January 10th. I think I'm being followed. Black sedan, and at the very bottom of the box, a single sheet of paper. A letter. To Ruby, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if you found this, it means you fought. I knew you would. I did not tell you about the mess because I wanted to fix it myself. I wanted to be the father who provided, not the father who needed saving. But I underestimated them. They are not just greedy. They are organized. This box contains the proof. The emails I printed from Caleb's computer when he was asleep, the recording of the meeting with Huxley, the trust documents. The house is yours. Ruby, not to sell, to keep. To remind them that some things in this town are not for sale. Forgive your brother. He is weak, but he is not evil. He just wanted to be big. I am proud of you. You are the steel. Love, Dad. I stood in the silence of the basement, the tears finally coming. Hot, fast tears that dripped onto the dusty concrete. He had played them. He had let them think they were winning, all while he was building a fortress underground. I touched the paper. I have the rest. I whispered. I picked up the phone to call Nina. It was over. Miles Huxley was done. The sale was dead. The house was safe. But as I looked around the basement, at the tools, at the wood, at the history of a life built with hands, I realized something. This wasn't just about saving a house. It was about saving the truth. And tomorrow, I was going to hand that truth to the judge and watch the pillars of this town crumble. I closed the box. I locked it. I went upstairs, turned off the porch light, and for the first time in a week, I slept. Thank you for listening to this story. We hope you enjoyed the journey of Ruby Butler and her fight for her family's legacy. If you felt the tension of Marrow Glen or found yourself rooting for Ruby, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment letting us know where you are listening from. We are always amazed to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories. Your support helps us create more dramas like this one. Share your thoughts, theories, and reactions in the comments in English. We read every single one. Until next time, remember, sometimes the quietest people have the loudest secrets.